Hey, good morning, and welcome to another Aloha Friday. Um, it's interesting to note that something that's been on my mind a lot this week is before I became a teacher, I worked at the Indianapolis Zoo for about 10 years as an area manager. And so this is an old picture of me. Here I am right next to Tomby. And one might say I left the animals to come and work with the beasts. But while I was at the zoo, I worked a lot with giraffes, elephants, gazelles, rhinos, and an assortment of different African bird species, and did quite a bit of research with elephants. And so, did some work with this is some of the work we did with reproductive physiology, which led to the first successful artificial insemination of an African elephant. Also, did some work on elephant visual acuity. But what I've actually been thinking a lot is about the spatial memory work that we did on elephants, because, of course, everybody always talks about how great an elephant's memory is, and we wanted to test that. And so the test was kind of simple. We would put the elephant in the middle of 8 pots around them, and each pot had an apple in it. And so the idea was that they had to remember which pot they went to in order to get all 8 apples. And so if they could remember that, they would get 8 apples. If they made one mistake, they could only get 7 apples, and so on. And so it was a test to look at, how well elephants could remember which pot they had been to. What I've been thinking a lot about is elephants learned real quickly a system to remember where they went. And what they would do is they would always, well, some would go to the right, so they would go to, let's say, pot number 2, and then they would go to pot number 1, and then they would go to pot number 8 and number 7, and so on. And so what was obvious is they had a system down, and then they didn't really need to remember all the pots. They just had to remember which pot they went to the last time. So if I went to 2 last time, now I would go to 1. If I went to 1, then I would go to 8, and so on. And so they would just kind of work their way around. Some elephants would go to the right, some would go to the left. It was just really interesting to me that several of the elephants developed this type of system to remember where they would go. What does that have to do with, where I'm at now? Well, I found it interesting because these types of behavioral systems or learning habits are things that we do in school. In school, we call these predictable practices. And these are just things like procedures that we set up within school that help kids to get on task, or to help kids learn, to help kids remember things. So they don't have to remember everything. They just have to kind of remember what was the last thing that they did and what do they need to do next. And these kinds of things are talked a lot about in a book that I've been reading a lot. Actually, I think I'm on my 3rd reading, by James Clear, that is Atomic Habits. And so I'm in several discussions with other educators about how we can use these types of ideas to create, positive learning routines for our students. So today I wanted to talk a little bit about like things that we do here in school and those laws of behavioral change that James Clear talks about that can help us develop these types of systems. And then next week, I kind of want to do an extension of that as far as maybe like what sort of things could be done at home for kids that might be struggling getting, homework done and those types of things. And so, I just kind of want to focus on this kind of idea of creating good habits. And so the first one would be to kind of make it obvious. And that is, like here at school, one of the obvious things that we do during Connect, it's like when that first bell rings and they come in and we do announcements, the very next thing we do is check Skyward and Canvas for any missing assignments. So that's just what we do. It's obvious. we've been in school for almost 3 weeks now, and my Connect kids are making fun of other kids who are like, well, what do I do now? It's obvious that that is what we do. It's also helpful to make it attractive. And so, this is the classic, get a positive reinforcement or praise when you ask a good question in class. You want to make it attractive to the students. And in Canvas, when they submit an assignment, there's little confetti that comes up. That those types of things just trigger that dopamine, and it makes it pleasurable. The third law would be to make it easy. These types of things would be like in class where when I give an assignment, I always give, 10, 15, maybe even 20 minutes to complete that assignment in class, or at least get a good start on it. And so I have found that once kids start working on an assignment, they're much more likely to finish it versus as they're walking out the door, throwing assignments at them. That's my rate of getting those actually submitted is very low. Whereas if I start in the start during class, give them time to get at least maybe half, 3/4 of it done, they're much more likely to complete it later. And then the last one would be to kind of make it satisfying. This one's a little tougher with kids because, they have to actually complete a unit or complete something. That learning sometimes isn't always self-satisfying as it might be as we get older. And so a lot of times I'll have like a reflection page that kind of articulates exactly the learning goals that they were able to achieve throughout that unit. Try to, let them kind of tick off all the different things that they were able to accomplish during that time, and make it real succinct and obvious to them that those were things that they got done. And I find that real helpful as well. It's interesting to note that if you have a habit that you're trying to break, there are rules for those too, which are the opposite of creating a habit. And so, if you're trying to break a habit, you want to make it invisible. You want to make it unattractive. You want to make it more difficult. You don't want it to be satisfying. Unfortunately, a lot of times, though, the bad habits that we have are there because they, do those things that are up on the top there. So, we'll want to keep an eye on those as we go through those. Real quick, as far as some things that are happening, there is the Teen Talk instructional date has been set for September 19th. That is an information sheet was sent home yesterday with Connect students, but it's actually within Skyward. So if you go into Skyward, and I think there's like a form link or something for parents. I can't see it as a teacher. And so you might want to hunt for that in Skyward. A few of the parents who are real active in Skyward have already completed that document. So I think it's just a click and, yeah, we're cool. But again, that's going to be September 19th. We're also in the middle of planning our field trip to the zoo, ironically, which will be September 29th. And I wanted to make parents aware of that super early because we're going to need about 15 or so parent chaperones to attend that. So I wanted to give parents plenty of time to make arrangements if that is something that you would be able to do. We would certainly appreciate your help with being a chaperone on that. So more information on that. Again, that's September 29th. As far as what's happening in science and in biology. So this week in science, we've been continuing to work on collecting data and analyzing data. So making graphs and that sort of thing. Next week, we're going to start combining some of the different measurements, different units, looking at things like buoyancy. And I'll probably give the first notebook quiz for science on Friday. Now, the midterm is on Thursday, so that test will not be on the first midterm, but that's just the way it's. I definitely want to give it before Labor Day weekend. In biology, we have finished our first quiz, and we're now doing macromolecules, so carbon-based molecules, which is a great unit, one that I'm real passionate about as far as, really looking at, carbohydrates, lipids, proteins, nucleic acids, those types of things. A lot of those are in our diet and can have effect on our health and wellness, which is something that I'm very passionate about. And so, if you hear kids talking about, the problems of sugar and how try to reduce complex carbohydrates and boost protein and those types of things, that's coming from me. Sorry about that. And that is where we're at right now. Definitely not going to be able to finish that before midterm. So yeah, midterm, important to note, is next week. So on Thursday, what that simply means is all assignments are going to close in Canvas on Thursday. So this weekend would be a great weekend to pull up Skyward, look for any missing assignments at the top of the page, like I showed you. I think it was last week or the week before last. And those are the ones that you'll want to then log into Canvas and make sure those get completed. If there are any low grades, say like 3 out of 5 or something like that, those can be redone. So any assignments in Canvas that are like practice or labs or those types of things can be redone for additional points. So this would be a great weekend for that, because next week's going to be a pretty busy week in science as we're wrapping up for that first notebook quiz. And again, those are going to close on Thursday. So thank you so much for everything you do to continue to support the learning that takes place in my class. Throw me a appreciate down there at the bottom on here on Parent Squared. That would be awesome. And as always, if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, please do not hesitate to contact me here within Parent Square. Remember, I'm the only one who can see those comments. If you're commenting on the video in YouTube, everybody can see it. So make sure you plan your comments accordingly. So thank you so much. Have a great week.